evaluation question, I've been asked in what ways does my media product use, develop or challenge forms and conventions of real media products. So in order to answer this question, I've looked into the conventions and then taken examples from real documentaries and then seen whether I develop or challenge this. So first convention of many documentaries is to do with the voiceover. It's usually authoritative and expresses the moral meaning of the documentary. This can traditionally be seen in David Attenborough's Life in the Underground.
An eye from another world. A smell detector investigating the path ahead. We don't often see a snail that way.
In my documentary, I did this by writing the script and getting someone else to do the reading for me.
Do those on the graveyard shift go to their graves earlier than you and I? We know night shift work has been linked to higher rates of type 2 diabetes, heart attacks and even cancer.
As a teenage girl, I felt like I did not have the maturity or authority in my voice, so I asked a family friend who's older and male for the stereotypical voiceover tone. Another convention is natural lighting. I think I've actually challenged this convention sometimes in my documentary. So at the bakery, I used a halo light to illuminate the food being taken out in a dark room to emphasize the eerie time of night.
But you don't want to wake up so early in the morning? Because I miss going out in the evening, so I cannot go.
Most documentaries, for example, the Vice documentaries, employ natural lighting using the sun or the interior lights available.
At Kubanti's place, the groomsmen pop a final squat to coordinate the snatch.
We're planning the kidnapping right now.
How long have you guys been planning this? Who's the girl? Is it somebody you've been friends with, somebody you know, or is it somebody like your family knows?
Another convention is that the mise-en-scene is naturalistic. So I've developed this convention because all of the workers I've interviewed are in their uniform. I asked the train workers to wear high-visibility jackets and the nurse to wear her uniform, as well as the hotel staff to be in their suits. So an example of this is Louis Theroux's Bodybuilders in his Weird Weekends documentary series.
Most women are awesome.
What did you say?
And these bodybuilders are all in the costume that they wear for the shows. So one of the main ways of getting information across in documentaries is by doing interviews. And I have, of course, used interviews in my documentary, as this is more of an anthropological documentary discussing the human story behind business. So I think that interviewing the workers is really crucial.
It frees up time for me during the day to do other things, doctor's appointments, business appointments, and normal run-of-the-mill things you would do as an household, So that's good. Socially, it's not very good.
You can't drink any alcohol 8 hours before starting work. Drink is out of the way.
And during these interviews, the convention is that the camera remains mainly static, so the audience aren't distracted by the interview by any movement. So, for example, busting the drug millions inside the National Crime Agency.
You can be a long time waiting for something to happen.
And Blackfish.
So it didn't just happen. It's not a singular event. You have to go back over 20 years to understand.
Exciting thing to do until everybody wanted to do it.
But I think that I have broken this convention because in the hospital I used a wheelchair and a Steadicam and rolled down a long hallway whilst the nurse walked towards me.
I'm working from 7:30 p.m. until 8 a.m. in the morning. The hardest thing about working night shifts is the tiredness and the exhaustion.
And I asked her questions because I wanted to reflect the rush nature of her job and for the audience to kind of imagine that she's actually on the job in the interview. So the mise-en-scene of the documentary is always portrayed in the interview. So a documentary about a band or a concert venue might be in the studio for the setting of the interview. And I've definitely developed this convention because I interviewed all of the workers in their place of work. So the chefs are in the kitchen, the nurses in the hospital, the market sellers in the market, and the tube workers are in the station, the hotel workers are in the hotel. And other documentaries also employ this technique. An interesting one I found was Narcos, Cisaros and Peru. It's all about the cocaine industry, and it's actually shot in the fields.
Trained by the cartels to the war on drugs in the remote jungles of Peru. This is a series about the new cartel wars and the legacy left behind by Pablo Escobar.
Another convention is cutaways are edited into the interview to illustrate what the interviewee is talking about. I use this technique a lot in my documentary because it smoothed over the shots where the continuity was not quite right or if there was a jump cut, and it also contextualized the topic of conversation.
By 8 o'clock in the evening I leave the house to be here from 9 o'clock in the evening to start work. It's not easy, no, because I've got kids at home, like other people, so obviously I don't really see them a lot, but then sometimes it's good because you're asleep, so you've got your partner and your children, and they have to get on with it, they have to do their own thing.
So for example, Vice's documentary, London's Hedonistic Polyamorous Unicorn Movement, uses interesting cutaways to demonstrate what these people are talking about.
I'm Sammy, also known as Sassicorn. I'm a pureblood unicorn and also a professional kids entertainer.
I'm Amy, I do crafts, but I'm also a cosmocorn.
I'm Miles and I'm the Metricorn. I mainly do bookings for festivals and parties in London as well as DJing.
I'm Emma and I'm also a fabulous unicorn.
As well as Angel Hayes on Striving, Struggling and Surviving.
Oh yeah, and my girlfriend was going to rehab, which was bad.
You guys had a really high profile situation.
If that's what you want to call it.
And no, I just mean that you guys were like very much vaunted and in love and people admired you guys and it was a lot of pressure and all this stuff like thrust upon you as a relationship. And then, you know, once that was done, then you like made all this music.
Another convention is set up scenarios or shaped realism. So I often ask the workers to kind of act like they were working or to just ignore me while I was filming. So this shaped realism helps the audience to understand their jobs more.
Wake up very early, which is hard, but I think harder than that is not having weekends off. That is really hard.
It's hard to find an example in a documentary of shaped realism because I don't know whether it was genuine or not, because that's the effect that you're trying to make when you employ shaped realism. Another convention that sometimes is humour. This makes the people more likeable or relatable. And Mark, who works in the market, made funny remarks and the viewer can empathise with him and his way of work.
They have to do their own thing. You know, but Sunday's a bit of a nightmare because when you lot are eating Sunday lunch, I have to go to bed.
An example of this is Azealia Banks on being a controversial witch. She makes jokes so people can understand what her profession is.
I was really like rethinking my life plan. I was just like, wait, I'm not famous and I'm 14 already. This is ridiculous. Like, I was supposed to be like dancing in the video with Little Bow Wow already, you know?
So according to Bill Nichols' 6 modes of documentaries, mine is an observational documentary. And the conventions of this are to simply and spontaneously observed lived life with a minimum of intervention. So I've tried to ensure that I don't interrupt or kind of sculpt the way that the interview goes to make it more genuine. So I made open-ended questions so they can explain what their way of work is like from their perspective. So there's a number of documentaries that are like this, such as Albert and David and Malias, The Charlotte's Zeroins, Give Me Shelter, and Don't Look Back, about Bob Dylan's tour of England.
God damn. The Vanishing American. God, I feel like I've been through some kind of thing, right? You have. No, but I mean, it's not.
So another convention is TV documentaries are often on something every day. and the Sphera's work is very much an everyday subject. A convention of a lot of documentaries is to have an actual presenter that's on camera, not just a voice of God. But I decided to take the focus away from the individual presenter and make the subjects and the workers the main focus of the documentary. So Louis Theroux or Billy J.D. Porter are famous examples of documentary presenters.
To be bred just to be hunted, you know, what kind of a life is that?
No.
Not much one.
Wonderful, because 1/10 of them is selected and becomes a magic bull forever.
Very rickety and rusty, so I'm going to try it out. Maybe it's a typical Chinese beach pastime, who knows? I can't...
But I find that with these documentaries, it's about them, and because they're a celebrity in their own right, it kind of takes away from the actual subject. So I didn't do that. In this video, I'm going to be explaining the conventions of my ancillary tasks, a listings magazine and a newspaper advert. So first of all, the newspaper advert for Channel 4 has an instructions manual basically online for their graphic designers of the conventions that they have to adhere to. It includes everything from the font width to what order the day, date, month and time has to be in, what type of picture to use, what composition, how many millimeters the Channel 4 logo is, and this really helped me in adhering to the conventions of a Channel 4 newspaper print advert. So this is my ancillary task for the newspaper advert. The conventions of the Channel 4 newspaper advert are for the C4 headline font to be used and placed in a text box. The art should be a directed imagery commissioned by Channel 4. The URL is positioned correctly and directs the reader to the relevant web page. The colour is chosen from the colour palette. The logo is the correct size and correct position. The C4 headline font is placed in a text box, and the text box colour has also been selected from the colour palette. The logo is the primary element of that identity. However, the other component plays an important role in establishing the Channel 4 visual style. So this is an example of one of their print advertisements for Britain's Forgotten Children, and they've adhered to their conventions on their manual. Like mine, they use the Channel 4 font and put it in a text box that matches the colours of the picture. Their logo is the right size and it's a PNG, so it's see-through, and there's a link in the bottom right corner which takes you to the relevant web page. I also used the blur tool to make the clock appear as if it was shaking like an alarm after it's been smashed. I found that quite a few of their print adverts use quite dramatic Photoshop effects to attract the viewers to make them want to watch the documentary afterwards. For the second ancillary task, I had to make a double-page spread of a listings magazine explaining my documentary. So this is my ancillary task for the listings magazine. I adhered to the conventions by analysing real magazines. I picked one up from the station outside my house, and I found an excerpt on a TV series which is quite similar to a documentary, and I used similar elements to that one. The conventions of a double-page listings magazine is that there's one page full of picture sometimes, with a caption in the lower right in white text if there's a black background, or black text if there's a white background. On the far edge of the paper at the bottom has the page number, magazine name and title. There are only two colours, black and white, in this particular one. The font for the article is Calibri, but the font in the title is sans serif and bold. There are thin lines again used to separate the elements. In others, however, there were sometimes more than two colours. In this one there's four. There's two variants of red, one darker and one lighter. There's black for the article font and white for the background. The quotation marks are unconventional, and I used these in my listings magazine because I think they really make it stand out. The photograph is centered. There are rectangular lines of red and lighter red to separate the elements of the article. I use this but in black because I think it looks a bit cleaner. In the bottom right, the name of the magazine or website and page number and a read more here. I also include the link to my made-up listings magazine. The font of the article is sans serif again, and the same as the title, but the title is bolder and the captions are italic. I use this variation because it draws people around the page and allows them to read the whole article. So this double-page spread from Time Out magazine was one of my main inspirations. I like how the article font is justified to the very end and hyphened if needed. It looks straight and clean. I like the black, white, red colour scheme and how this is reflected in the upper right-hand photograph.